What are you dealing with your company right now? What are the challenge points? What are the places where it's not performing as you want? How are you feeling trapped in the business? What's holding you there? How do I get them to want to give me their name and contact information in some way so I can engage them in the sales process for whatever products it is that I'm selling? These things in total are going to help you increase your sales and revenue, but to do it without necessarily spending more money.
Maui Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel, and today it's going to be the first of a three-part series to help you grow your sales. As we look at what's going on in your business, one of the things that I noticed from working with several hundred different companies in our coaching program, in the last short while, sales has been a big theme. How can we help them increase sales? And I want to come back, and in this particular episode of the podcast, I want to share with you, I'll call them 6 secrets that have stood the test of time to help you increase your sales. 6 sales secrets that have stood the test of time. Now, I first started doing my selling. The first company I ever started was in 1992, and that was where I first was introduced to even learning about sales. That company failed. It went out, and it was a real eye-opener for me. I was 22 years old and had my first business go under. I started my next business when I was 26. That business went on to generate millions of dollars in sales, actually tens of millions of dollars in sales and millions of dollars in profit. And it was in that second business that I really started to first grasp and later to master the secrets of what it means to sell effectively. So what we're going to be talking about in this podcast are 6 of these time-tested ideas, strategies, to help you and your company sell more. So with that said, let's jump into it. For the first one, we're going to label this customer intimacy. Now, I use that word intimacy on purpose, and specifically what I'm meaning by customer intimacy here is I want you to get to know your customer. Many people think they know their customer, but when I ask questions like what are the deepest hopes, fears, or aspirations that your customer has about your product or service, what that relates to it. For example, I might say, what's the biggest pain point that your product or service solves? And around that pain point, what are the things that in the back of the prospect's mind, in your target audience, what is it that they secretly fear? What is it that they yearn for? To really understand that is one of the first places to increase sales for you. Your customers, they want to know that you understand their unique situation. I'm going to use unique in quotation marks. Quite frankly, a lot of what your customer thinks is unique about them, we know isn't. But they believe that their situation is different from everybody else that you might have ever worked with. And I'll give an example in my own business life. So here we've done now we've been working with business owners for over 20 years now. And what's interesting is that business owners will consistently say to me, David, my business is different. My business is special. My business is unique. I'm sure what you do applies to lots of other companies, but our situation is special. And they'll go on and I'll ask the question, well, tell me, what are you dealing with your company right now? What are the challenge points? What are the places where it's not performing as you want? How are you feeling trapped in the business? What's holding you there? And they'll give answers, things like, Dave, what traps me in the business right now is that no one else can do the things that I can do. Or they'll say things like, we're understaffed, so I have to scramble and fill the holes, playing this gap catcher role. Or, if I don't ask these bigger questions strategically about the business, David, no one else does. Or they'll say, it feels like the business works well when I'm there, but the moment I pull myself out of the business, it just doesn't run as well. It starts to degrade a bit. And so you'll start hearing those commonalities. And what I know is that I've talked with so many different business owners that I'll hear those same things over and over and over again. Yet all the clients are going to say, my business is unique and different. What they don't see, and the same is true of your customers, your clients, they see their situation, but they don't see the context, the larger picture of the similarities or the commonalities between them and the 100 or the 1,000 other customers that are just like them that you work with. Now, there might be multiple archetypes of customers that you have. For example, in our world, we probably have the middle stage level 2 business owner, which is the company that works well, but only if the owner's there. They have an owner-reliant company and they're wanting to scale beyond there, but to do that, they have to pull that owner out of the center of everything and start to reduce reliances through better systems, through better cross-training of their team, and by training the owner of how to intelligently and effectively delegate and still maintain good internal control so that they can make sure the right things are happening the right way at the right times. So that customer, that client type has certain needs, and they have certain pieces about themselves they believe to be unique. Yet pretty much any business that is at that middle stage level 2 part, that owner-reliant stage, are going to have those same body of concerns, of challenges, of pain points, of hopes, dreams, and aspirations. Then we have our advanced stage level 2 companies we work with that the owner has started to pull him or herself out of the middle. They've got 1, 2, or 3 other really key executive level leaders in the business, and they're growing rapidly. So they have a different set of challenges and struggles as they want to go to that truly owner independent business and scale it to level 3. So how about for your customers, for your clients? What are the quote unquote unique things about each of them that are in common? If I can know my customer intimately, remember, the most powerful words you can speak to a client or to a customer are the words that they say in the back of their mind when they're really being honest with themselves. So how do you do that? You have to listen, so that when you talk with prospects, talk with customers as they describe their problems, you want to be able to articulate it in their language, in their words. Internally you might say, for example, imagine you're running a construction company, and you might say internally, describe the challenge points that they feel, things like, they want to make sure this construction project isn't a bottomless pit. They want to make sure that this construction project is not going to go over budget or take too long. They're going to want to make sure that they're not going to be gouged on price. These are the things that are going on in the back of the mind of their prospects in their marketplace. But how does the customer language it? The customer might say something along the lines, not what they say to you, but what does a customer say to themselves? That's the powerful language you're trying to get at. And if you listen closely to enough of your customers, you'll hear the language that they use to themselves when they express their hopes, fears, aspirations, concerns, pain point about your type of product or service for the problem that it solves for them. In construction, it might sound something like this. They might say, what I really, really want is I just want this project to be done. I don't want to have to make more decisions. I wish I could just, have you handle it for me. We've decided on it. I'd like to come home, tomorrow and have it all be done. Just get this over with so I can get on with enjoying, my beautiful deck. I can get on enjoying my new kitchen. They also probably have a concern in there about something along the lines of, how long is this thing going to disrupt their lives? Gosh, this is going to be a hassle for me. It almost seems like it's not even worth it. But yet what's their hope and ambition about that new kitchen? It might be something like, this is the kitchen that you've always wanted to cook in. So now when I can know their language in any sales interaction or in any marketing interaction, I can use their language. I can say, look, Mrs. Johnson, I understand that part of you just wants this to be done. You want to, come in tomorrow afternoon after spending a day in the office and have your new kitchen done. Now, we can't quite do that, but I want to let you know that while it might seem like a long period over the course of the next 4.5 to 5 weeks as we do the kitchen, I want you to remember, you've told me that what matters to you is that this is the kitchen that you've always dreamed of being able to cook for your family in. This is the kitchen that you've always wanted from when you were younger. Isn't that true? Got it. So here's what I'm going to ask that you do, Mrs. Johnson. I know that for you, you want it to be done like that. Now recognize the next 5 to 6 weeks, that's going to feel while you're in it long, but it's a blink of the eye. And down the road in 2 months, 2 years, 12 years, 20 years, you're going to have all that time to enjoy the kitchen. Can you stay with me like that, Mrs. Johnson? Right? Notice when you use language that's in their words, that really speaks to what they are concerned with. Mrs. Johnson, or whoever your prospect or customer is, you can almost see when you've got the words right, you can almost see them relax. You can almost see it. You can hear it like they've had a deep breath and they've let it out, and you can hear the sigh with that part. And this is so important, and here's why it matters. When I can use my prospects and use my clients' language back with them, the things that speak to that secret part of them, to have that intimacy, to know that about them, they feel understood. And when they feel understood, that's one of the core ways that you build trust and credibility into this process. Now, it behooves you, it puts pressure on you that you better make sure that your business can deliver on the promises that you're making. I'm assuming that that's true. When I look around the people that, for example, we work with and coach, they generally produce a great product or service. What they do it fantastically. But what they don't necessarily do initially, that we have to work with them, is how do they find the language to message to clients and also to prospective people in the marketplace through their marketing and also through their actual sales languaging, their sales scripting and their word tracks. How can they use their prospects, use their clients' own words directly with them so that the client, the prospect feels like, wow, finally somebody understands what's going on for me. And when they know that you understand, they trust that you're going to take the next step with them a lot more. Think about it going to a doctor. You go to a doctor, and when she listens to your list of symptoms and she asks probing questions, and when she can articulate back that she really does know what's going on for you, using your language back, and says, here's what's going on, and here's what we'll address with you, and here's what you can expect. You can almost see that how much more relaxed you are. Like, finally, this person understands me. I trust the diagnosis because I trust that they actually heard me. And what's more, they heard even the things that I didn't directly say, but they asked the follow-on questions that allow me to trust that they really do get what's going on for me. So the first timeless sales secret is customer intimacy. Knowing your customer, your product, your prospect, the marketplace, what is it that are their hopes, fears, dreams, and ambitions, aspirations, as it relates to the problem that your product or service solves, either directly or tangentially around it. What's the body of concern that they have, and how do you speak in their language? The second one, and this is one that will seem obvious, but so many businesses get it wrong. The second one is always speak in you language. Now, you language is literal, and it's also more than literal. Literally, you language means, I'm talking to, let's say, for example, I run a professional services firm, and I'm talking to Carl. I say, Carl, what I understand is your need is blank. Here's what this will do for you. I don't want to talk about what we do. Here's what I'll do for you. No, here's what you'll get. Not what you'll do for them. No, here's what you'll get. Here's what you'll find. Here's how this will impact. This is what it will mean for you. I always want to make sure I bring it back to that other parties, to speak from their frame of reference, not from my own. It was interesting. Earlier today, I had a mastermind session with my mastermind group here in Jackson. And one of my mastermind partners and I were talking about a trip that I want to take this summer with two of my kids. Ideally with all three of them, but I'm not sure if the third one's going to want to go or not. And as I described the trip, he said something to me. He said, David, I hear what you're wanting. You're wanting time to connect with your sons. You're wanting to have a memory with your kids. You're wanting to have an adventure together. Those are all great. But let me just ask you, what is it that from your kids' perspective that this trip will do for them? What is it that they're wanting or they're not wanting? He pulled me out of my frame of reference to look at it from my kids' perspective. And that was really interesting. And that's the same thing that applies here. Now, when I thought about it, I'm like, well, what is it, my kid? This is an adventure for my kids. This is a chance for them to, what they get out of it is they get a chance to go explore, to have some time where they get to have an adventure in a foreign country where some of the time will be with us, but some they can be there off on their own exploring. So when I started thinking about it from the you language, it changed it. Tonight when I go home, I'm going to start asking questions of my kids. Hey, from your perspective, what is it that you find most exciting about the idea of this trip? What is it that you might have as concerns that you want to voice now so we can work for ways that we can solve that so you have the experience that you want? It was a really good awakener. I see so many business owners and so many of their companies' marketing teams and sales forces that talk about I and us versus you and your. And it's not just a literal thing. It's also, in addition, an attitudinal thing. It's a frame of reference. Same thing applies to your people in the field. Let's say, for example, in this professional services firm, I've got technicians that go out, or experts that go into an office, into a company to do that consulting work or to do that legal or accounting work. I don't want the people who are doing the work, my producers, to go in and talk about themselves or us as a company. I want to make sure they always tie it back into the client's frame of reference, the prospect's frame of reference. This is from a sales perspective, but also from a retention or delighting of your customers or clients perspective. So for example, imagine you had a financial services company and I go in there and I'm talking to Tina. Tina, here's what we're working on right now for you. We're putting together, your comprehensive financial plan. Now, the important part about this for you is it will allow you to have a clear picture of where you stand today and looking at what are the projections for if we do nothing different from what we currently have, where are we likely to get you to? What will ultimately be where you'll find yourself? And then I'm going to make some suggestions such that we can increase your rate of return, reduce your risk so that you increase your certainty of reaching your income goals passively when you step away from your job, when you step away or into retirement. It's an example of talking from you perspective, making sure you put it in their frame of reference. Really important. The third timeless sales secret, and this is an important one, it has to do with lead capture. Now, specifically, let me describe what I mean with this one here. Every business and every marketplace has what we'll call window shoppers. Now, a window shopper is somebody who you have some initial contact with, or they have contact with you, but you don't know explicitly who they are. You have somebody who's coming in as a visitor, but you haven't converted that visitor into an actual prospect. Now, how do you do that? Let's take the most literal case, somebody who goes into a retail establishment. And so there they are, they're just kind of browsing through, but until you have a name and some form of contact information, all you really have is an amorphous visitor. The same thing could be true of a website, for example. But in that store, how do I get them to want to give me their name and contact information in some way so I can engage them in the sales process for whatever products it is that I'm selling? On a website, that might sound a little bit differently. It might be I come to this website, for example, I would say my company markets a particular software product. For example, one of the companies we work with does a software as a service, an SaaS product for banks. If you were to go to their website, you're a visitor there. They might be able to track a little bit of a cookie on you and see if they can't retarget ads through Google or some of the other ad networks that are out there, but they really have no way of reaching out to you. So we need to take you from a visitor and turn you into an actual prospect, to take you from a window shopper into someone who has had some real interaction with an actual salesperson. So in this case, it might be something as, they might give a white paper out about how to reduce the cost of the technology stack that banks use, which is what their product solves for a bank. It helps them go from 7 or 9 different technology solutions down to 1, 2, or 3, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year for a regional bank. And it's a big deal in that world. Plus it increases efficiencies, et cetera, et cetera. But I need to find a way to find out who that visitor is. So that can be at a website. I have to give something out for free. It could be a free report, it could be a training series, it could be a webinar that you're inviting them to with that part. On our website, if you go there, you'll notice that there's a free toolkit, a business growth toolkit. Why do we give that out? Because we know by giving something of great value, we take a visitor to our website and convert a large number of them into actual prospects, actual people that we can have some interaction with. Now, ideally, whatever you're going to use for that gateway gift that you're giving to them, it's going to have to be something that has a high perceived value but a low actual cost of fulfillment. High perceived value, low cost of fulfillment. Information is often a great way to go. It costs a lot to create it, but it's essentially free to distribute it. So for example, on our part, we put together a 36 tool toolkit. It's fantastic. Training videos are on there. PDF tools are on there. Many of the tools that we've used with coaching clients. It's really good stuff. But the cost to replicate it is essentially free because we've already done that. Now it's just digitized information. We can disseminate it to one person or 100 million people, and the cost is essentially free. Yes, I know we'll have more server cost or more energy cost. I get it, but effectively it's free with that part. It could be a physical thing. Like for example, when you go to a trade show, like this software as a service company we work with, they do a lot of their marketing through trade shows, for trade shows where lenders are at. They have their booth that's there. They might have 1,000 people come by their booth and kind of take a curious peek what's going on in there. How do they take that 1,000 people and get 100 true prospects from that? You know, I've seen at trade shows they've done things like a free drawing for a new iPad is an example of what you might see. That drawing is a way to get business cards into, or in many cases if it's a trade show or convention, now they have it electronically, they kind of tap their device and it shares the electronic business card. But it's their way of getting that visitor to become an actual prospect by giving contact information over that now they can follow up. You know, obviously if someone walks to the trade show booth, that's the time for a sales interaction. But the reality is that many of those sales interactions aren't going to go anywhere at a trade show. That what's going to have to happen is there's going to have to be some real intense follow-up. That the trade show is to take a visitor into an actual prospect and then to have some way of setting that to the next step, to have some ongoing contact of that sales process happening afterwards. But this lead capture component, I see so many businesses where they'll have a flow of visitors go across their business, either in physical location or in a digital location like a website or some other mechanism, but they have no way of offering something that's appealing and sexy enough, that's valuable enough, perceived-wise, by that visitor to make them want to stop for a moment, introduce themselves to your company such that you can have some follow-up with them in exchange for whatever you have to offer them. So these are examples and how important it is for you. In your current lead flow, there's probably, it could be anywhere, I've seen it with the clients we've coached, 10, 20% extra lead flow with the same marketing spend, all the way to I've seen clients of ours double or triple their lead flow without spending any more money. I want you to think about that for a moment. If you were to double your lead flow without spending any more marketing dollars, what would that be worth it to your company? What if you couldn't double it? What if you could increase your lead flow by 15% without spending any more money? What would the value of that be to your company? For most businesses, that might bring in an extra $50,000 to $250,000 of profit simply by increasing lead flow that way by 15%. It's a very common thing that we see for companies in the $1 to $20 million range, which is typically where companies are when we first start getting a chance to work with them. So how do we make sure that we turn, in your world, a window shopper into an actual prospect by getting them to share contact information so that now you can have an actual sales conversation and sales follow-up with them? Now, the next one I want to share with you, the timeless secret number 4, we call this feed your winners, starve your losers. What do I mean by that? Every business in their marketing has multiple sales tactics that they use. And in those tactics that you use, commonly what happens is companies get into a certain way and a certain pattern of how they spend their marketing dollars. You know, for example, let's say that you were a blue-collar services firm and you have a let's make it $5 million a year business, and you typically spend somewhere around about 6 to 7% of your revenue on your marketing tactics that you're playing through. Actually, let's make it 10% to make the math really easy. So you're spending $500,000 a year on marketing to generate that $5 million of sales. That's not unreasonable for a blue-collar services firm. You know, most of them, if they're scaled beyond just the mom and pop that does everything off of word and mouth, where they have hit that self-employment trap where they can't grow anymore because they're so busy servicing and they haven't figured out a way to get the owner out of any of the activities of producing or selling or running the business, right? If they haven't done any of that, then probably they're not spending 10% on their marketing. But as you start to grow a company and you have scalable production and scalable sales capacity, so you can grow by 20%, 40%, 100%, 200-300% over the next several years, you probably are going to be feeding the machine with marketing dollars. So probably you're not spending 20%, but you're also probably not spending 2%. So we're going to use 10%, keeps my math simple. So here you are in that company, you're spending $500,000 on your marketing. Chances are how you spend that money this year is what you did last year with a few minor tweaks. And how you did it last year was what you did prior with a few minor tweaks. And I see this all the time where companies get into a particular way of doing their marketing and they never question it. So, and they track numbers, but the numbers they track don't give them meaningful information, or they don't know how to use that information. I'll give an example, an actual story of one of our clients. So this is a client of ours. They ran actually it was a blue-collar services firm. And in this services company, they were spending roughly $500,000 on one particular tactic. That tactic was their Google pay-per-click ads. Overall, they were spending probably closer to about, maybe about $700,000-800,000 a year on their marketing. And it was paying off. They were, it was a profitable company. But that $500,000 spend that they had, when I had them look at their numbers a specific way, and I'm going to share with you that exact metrics, KPIs I told them to take their information and tweak it a bit for them to see, it just jumped out at them. They were wasting most of that money. And I worked with them to change how they spent in an intelligent fashion. And I'll go through what it was, the advice, the coaching I gave to them and how they did it. But let me just share the bottom line for them first, and then I'll come back and flesh in the story. The bottom line for them is they reduced their ad spend by $250,000, by $250,000 per year. They ended up with the same revenue, the same profitability, gross profit margins. The only difference was they had an extra $250,000 of savings that dropped directly to their operating profit. It was amazing, right? Fantastic move for them. And that one bit of coaching insight meant $250,000 per year for them and more. So here's what it was. They were looking at their ad spend and they were doing all these different things, but they never looked at, for every $1 I spent on this marketing tactic, how many dollars does it generate back? What's the return per $1 of marketing spent? And the return that I asked them to look at was to do that for they had 6 major tactics. I had them do it for each of their major marketing tactics. And what became clear was pay-per-click, for every $1 they spent, they were generating roughly 50 to 60 cents in revenue. In other words, they were losing money before the cost of goods sold for their customers. For every dollar they spent, they were losing money on that part. Now, they had a concern. They said, well, David, the marketing company we work with says that the way we track means that there's lots of people who see us in pay-per-click but end up coming in through one of the other doorways, and we might be misattributing at that. So we're scared of changing. And that fear of change is one of the biggest things that holds businesses back. When it talks about feeding your winners and starving your losers, they get frozen and say, well, I don't know for sure that it's my winner. Or I don't know for sure that it's a loser, so I don't know what to do other than they keep doing the status quo. So I said, well, why don't we test that? Why don't we not accept what the marketing company who makes a fee that the more you spend with them, the more they make, since they're getting paid as a percentage of what you're spending. Why don't we recognize that that's a misalignment there, and let's look at this objectively. Why don't you start to test spending less and see if your other marketing tactics, if what happens to the performance there, if they're saying that your pay-per-click is driving other lead streams for you, but really the pay-per-click is what are sparking that, and your fear is if you cut back on pay-per-click, these other lead streams will be hurt. You've known about this, but why haven't you tested that? So what we did is we reduced down. We cut by, I don't remember the original cut that they did, but let's use in our example here, 50%. Cut by 50%. These other lead streams, when they cut, they weren't affected. So they cut 50% out of their spend. None of these other things were affected. What do we know? That 50% that they cut was a good 50% to cut, at least. And they can test and titrate their way down. And when they notice these things are being affected, they can make the choice to scale to that appropriate level. They took the savings that was they tested down and found the natural level for where pay-per-click actually made the most sense. They ended up having about $350,000 of quote-unquote saved revenue, saved cost. They used $100,000 of it to feed two other tactics that were working really well for them. Old school direct mail was working really well for them, and there's one other tactic that escapes me right now that they used. And they kept the other 250 as additional profit for themselves. So the key timeless sales secret is I have to get to my numbers such that I can obviously see which are my winners, which are my losers. When I have my losers, I take that and starve them, and whatever comes out of it, in this case it was $350,000 of saved resources, and I ask, is there one or more of my winners that I can feed some of this back into? In this case, they could use 100,000 of it. That was about the most that would make sense for them to do that with before the returns would be diminishing. And they said, great, then I'll go ahead and feed us as profit with whatever's left over. It's a different approach to business, and it's old school. But I notice with a lot of businesses that we coach that this is not their natural way of looking at it. And again, that metric that I would really encourage you to look at is that metric of what's your rate of return, your return on investment for every one marketing dollar spent, what does it bring back from you? Now there's a twist on that. You can look at for every $1 of marketing you spent on tactic A, B, C, D, and E, how many dollars of gross profit does it bring back for you? That's a different way of playing that same game. But the goal here, the strategic principle, the secret is feed your winners, starve your losers. The next one here, and I think this is also really important, number 5. Number 5 says we need to increase our sales coherence. I want to talk about sales coherence. Now, coherence is when things are in alignment. It's a term that you'll oftentimes hear coming out of, for example, physics will have coherence of light, that all the rays of light are aligned in the same way like a laser beam will do. In our context here, we're talking about sales coherence here. That means does everything in your company, the way your sales staff, your marketing staff, your production or fulfillment staff, operations people, whenever someone's talking to a customer or to your marketplace, is all the messaging consistent? Is everyone clear about who you are to the marketplace so that you have a simple, clear message that doesn't get watered down or muddled? And one of the places where I see this get screwed up is when a company tries to be too many different things to too many different people. You have to know what is it that you really do for your customers? What is it that your market really gets from you? And you want to boil that down to the most important one or two things that you are and represent to the marketplace. And I'll give an example for that. So, there's a lot of ways that you can look at, like, what do we do, Maui Mastermind? We put on business workshops and advanced trainings for business owners and for their key staff members. We train them on things like systems and controls and the financial pillar of their company, and we train them on marketing, and we train them on all kinds of different things. That's one thing that we do. We also have one-to-one coaching wherein we're being with a client, helping him or her have some accountability and have better focus and strategic planning for their company. And all these are things that we do. But that's not what we message to the marketplace. David, what is it that you do as a business? I would tell them, I said, well, you know how most business owners feel like they built something that they say that my business owns me sometimes, it feels like, more than I own it. We help business owners build a business, not just a job. How can they build a business that's independent of them, right? A growing, vibrant company that is independent of them. Now, when you say that to a business owner, they get it. Oh, okay, Maui Mastermind, that makes sense. They help people build owner-independent companies. Now, some of them say, I'm not interested in owner-independent business, right? They'd say, nope, not interested. Fine. But the people, the right people in the marketplace are going to say, that feels compelling to me. What we can't do is we can't say we're this and we're that and we're also this and we're also that. We can't be 7 different things to the marketplace. We can be one thing primarily to the marketplace. Of course, you can give the other things to them as well. Your market can get many different things from you. But what's the one thing that you want to be known for in your marketplace? And how can you make sure that your sales force, your marketing team, your operations team, anyone who comes into contact with your clients or customers uses that same messaging when they're talking and communicating with people out there in the marketplace? It's really important. When you do this, you start having things like more referral leads coming in because your field staff that are doing the work are using the correct messaging, and so people start giving more referrals. And you'll start noticing things like your marketing is more effective because it's much more laser beamed in on who you are in the marketplace. But David, we do so many different things. Fine. But if you want to scale successfully, you need to find a way to narrow that beam so that you can have coherence with your marketing, with your sales, and with your fulfillment teams, so that the marketplace hears a cohesive message about who you are in the marketplace from the perspective of how a customer or a prospect should or could view you. Critically important for that. There's one more here, which I think is critically important, number 6, timeless secret, which I'll call it outside perspective. Outside perspective. Now, outside perspective in this sense is, I think for you, you've been doing your own sales and marketing as a company for so long that it's hard to see things with fresh, new eyes. One of the best things that you can do is to go to someone in the outside that you trust, that has expertise, and have them look fresh. Hey, when you see how we sell, when you see our marketing messaging, what jumps out to you that you think that you would bring up to us? This person can be an outside consultant. It can be your business coach. It can be a mentor in the community that you know who has had experiences in your industry, or is just in general in business, he or she is a good business person. And when they give you that perspective, it's interesting. They'll ask questions or challenge you in ways that you haven't been challenged for a while. You might find that 10% of what they say is completely out there, no relevance whatsoever. And you might find that 50% of what they say has some relevance, but maybe they don't have the full information. But somewhere in there, there's going to be 10, 20, 30, 40% of what they share with you that's going to give you pause to look at some aspect of your sales and marketing processes and messaging in a fresh, new way. It is so valuable from that part. I'll give an example. I had a client recently that was at one of our events. It was our big Maui event out, the Business Success Summit that we do once a year in Hawaii. We've been doing this event now for 22 years. It was our 22nd annual event. Yeah, I mean, wow, it tells me that I'm getting old. But this is a client, he's been a client for a little bit of time, and he was working on his sales process for a particular new product that he has. And this is a company that realistically can be, over the course of the next 5 or 10 years, it might be a $50 to $100 million company. I mean, he's got a really good product, a great team. He's a very good business person. But he shared with me, David, while we're here, he kind of gave me the print-ups of what their scripting looked like, and he gave me the print-ups of what their their sales presentations look like. And in a short period of time, I was able to have insights for him, not because I'm special, but because I'm not in it day to day. I'm from the outside looking in. And when you take an experienced person from the outside looking in, they will see things differently and new from the person who's inside that bubble who's been doing it for too long. Now, the good news is that outside person will say provocative things that get the inside person thinking differently. So when you get outside perspectives, it will provoke new and different ways of thinking about your sales and marketing efforts. Then you'll take all your experiences and you'll find ways to intelligently use and apply what these outside parties are sharing with you. And I've given you several examples in this podcast, right? The example was challenging that client of ours to look at their marketing as what's the return on investment for every one marketing dollar spent for each of these main lead tactics. Oh, when they looked at it that way, it jumped out that their pay-per-click was a horrible place to spend as much money as they were. But then they had their defensive part come up and say, well, we're afraid that if we were to call that a loser and take that resource and feed it to our winners, we're afraid that it might come back to haunt us, right? I said, well, okay, well, we can protect you from that. How can we intelligently test spending less and paying attention to how the marketing on the whole looks like? That's an example of how someone from the outside can challenge the status quo in a way that you can't easily do because from the inside, you're too close to it. Now, that person might also be, and here's a great one for you, do you know of a really good salesperson in your community or someone you have a relationship with that's outside of your business? So let's say, for example, you ran a CPA firm and you had one person that did your sales, great, but do you know someone in your community that is a great salesperson, or someone in your peer group who is a great salesperson? Have that person look at your scripting and your messaging. Have that person perhaps even be willing to listen to a sales call that your salesperson does. They will have such good insight to give to you, such valuable insight. I've done this for many clients before wherein, I've said, hey, you at a workshop, right? I'll say, hey, you come over here, you come over here. I want to hear, how do you sell to this person? Pretend that Sheila here is your target audience. Go ahead and sell. And I'll just sit there and I'll watch them do that. And generally after even 2 or 3 minutes, sometimes it takes 5 or 6 minutes, some very glaring things are going to jump out to me. I'll say things like, well, I notice you're talking about all the things that you do, but it seems to me that you really didn't take the time in this process to build Sheila's motivation. Let me give an example for it. So, hey, Sheila, let me ask you here. Right now, when you look at, for example, let's say it was for a new CPA firm to do monthly accounting work for you. It's called write-up work. Now, Sheila, when you look at that right now, how are you currently getting your monthly write-up work done? Oh, you're doing it internally. And tell me, is that working well? It's not. Tell me more about what's going wrong with that. I hear you saying this, Sheila. What's that costing you in terms of, is it hurting you by not having accurate, timely financial information? It is. Well, tell me more about that. How else is it hurting you? What are the steps you're not able to take because you don't have that accurate, timely financial information? What do you think that's costing you? So it's directly costing you this. And so I'll just jump in with the role play. And they're like, wow, David, I never thought to do it that way. And what's interesting is when you have an outside person looking at that, again, they're going to see things from 7 degrees to the side, and that changes everything. Much of what they'll share with you, it's not going to be directly applicable. They won't have the context and all the background expertise that you have. But the things that apply that will push you to think fresh, you'll take your expertise and your background of knowledge to make the idea that you got from the outside party work so effectively. All right. So I know this is a longer episode of The Business Coach, but I really wanted, this is the first of a 3-part sequence on how can we help you increase sales. So this is the overview of 6 timeless sales secrets. First was customer intimacy. How do I make sure that I can understand in respect to the major problem that I solve for a customer or for a client, how can I understand my customers or my audiences or my marketplaces? What are their real fears, hopes, pain points, aspirations, struggles, challenges, frustrations, and I want to be able to speak that in their language. Number two is I always have to make sure that I'm talking about it from your perspective. So for example, when you use what you've learned in this particular episode, your prospects are going to find your sales staff more compelling. What that's going to mean is you're going to increase your sales without having to spend more on lead flow. Your conversion rate will go from X to X plus 10%, X plus 20%. And can you recognize that if you can increase your conversion rate, your sales closing rate as a sales team by 10, 20, 30% without spending more on marketing, can you see the impact that will have on your company's bottom line? Always speak from you. The third was take my visitors, take my window shoppers, and turn them into prospects by capturing who they are. To do that, generally, I'm going to have to make some kind of trade. I'm going to give them something of great value so that in return, they are going to share their contact information. We talked about it has to have a high perceived value, but really a low cost of fulfillment. Given examples on that. Number 4 was to feed your winners in your marketing and sales tactics and starve your losers. Now, we talked about that in terms of marketing tactics, but the same thing would apply with sales staff. Let's say you've got a sales team of 5 different individuals, and you have 2 of them are stars, 3 of them are struggling. Well, who do you give your best leads to? I know many companies, before I ever get a chance to talk with them or they're not working yet with a coach, and they'll go, well, we give all leads across the board equally. We divide them and we have 5 salespeople, each get 1/5. I tell them, I said, you're crazy. You know, when I look at the numbers, this person is selling, for every lead you give them, they're selling $3,000 of sales per lead that you give them. This person's at $3,200. These people are at $600, $700, $800 per lead you give them, which means that every time you give them a lead, it's costing you 2.5 times. So for every lead I take from them to fill these 2, I make 2.5 times more money on average. I fill these 2 people up and then and only then let overflow go to these others. But David, won't that mean that these people won't get enough leads and they'll quit? My comment to them is, why should I let that drive the decision? If I lose 1 or 2 of my weaker salespeople, you know, I wish them well in their career somewhere else. So feed your winners, starve your losers has to do with the marketing side, but it also applies to other areas of your company, like how you do lead distribution. Number 5 says sales coherence. I've got to make sure that the messaging that we as a company use, my sales force, my marketing messaging, the operational people that touch clients, everyone needs to be singing from the same hymnal. We have one clear, simple message that goes to the marketplace. And then finally, number 6, it makes sense to have regular doses of outside perspective, whether that be a mentor or someone in your mastermind group, a formal business coach, and third-party consultant, or whether you trade favors with another business owner that you know and you do for her company, she does for your company. But you need that outside perspective, because when you're doing this long enough, you stop seeing things as accurately as you need to, because things become too routine, too much habit. We need somebody to give us thoughts that shake things up, that provoke new ways of seeing our own company. And when we do all these things, here's what it does for you. These things in total are going to help you increase your sales and revenue, but to do it without necessarily spending more money. And when you increase your body of sales without spending more money, what happens to your bottom line? Of course, it goes up. So I want to say thank you for joining me here for this episode of The Business Coach. As always, please feel free to send in questions that you might have, situations that you want me to address here in future episodes of The Business Coach. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me today. Bye-bye.